Now, okay, so Donald Trump gets elected in November, and then who are we fighting with now? I mean, he gets elected obviously with by whom? By Republicans and presumably some Democrats, right?
So
And
yeah, so
independents.
I don't know if Democrats will vote for Donald Trump. I'm not saying to vote for Donald Trump.
Right.
I'm saying we can't vote for neoliberalism anymore and hope to change our system. And it's like people who don't think our system is broken enough. I mean, our system is way more broken than people understand. Here's what I found out. Here's just like one little thing. We can go on for hours, but here's one little thing I found out looking into this. So this all started when Ronald Reagan scared the hell out of the Democrats back in the 80s. And in 1984, the Congress, which had been solidly Democratic since FDR, flipped to the Republicans. And it scared the hell out of them so much that they decided, meaning they, Bill Clinton and Al Gore, decided, hey, let's become like them. Let's stop losing to them. Let's get in bed with big business. Let's get in bed with Wall Street. Let's cut off some of our social programs. Let's go against our own base in the inner cities. Let's do all these things so we can win elections, right? So they created the DLC, which was called the Democratic Leadership Committee, and that thing was riddled. Just to give you an example, who was on the executive board? Two executives from the Coke industries were
Right.
on the board
Right.
of the DLC. So that's what made my jaw drop. I'm like, oh my God, no wonder they deregulated Wall Street. No wonder they gutted Medicare. No wonder they built prisons instead of schools. No wonder they did NAFTA. And then guess what the Republicans did to thank Bill Clinton for all that? They impeached him.
Right. Well, no, wait a second. So it wasn't under Reagan, the Democrats lost the Senate, but not the House. Um,
In 84, the House, correct me if I'm wrong, the House flipped in 84. Somebody
the
Google
House
that.
the House flipped in '94. I mean the Senate, I believe, under Reagan for I think maybe at the midterm the Senate flipped. I think it was in 1980. 19, Reagan came in 82 in 80. Yeah, I think it was in 82 it actually flipped to Republicans in the Senate, but not the House. The House was, that's the Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan could argue and then go have a beer together. And that's the the story that we're told about that. But I think, the narrative of the DLC, of the Democratic Leadership Council, is the case. I mean, it was not. Clinton was the first chair of it, but it came out of, I think, a building movement out of the Democratic Party that, and I think Thomas Frank talks about this, and Lily Geismer, who we've interviewed on this program, that starting in the really, I mean, even in the late 60s, I mean, McGovern in some way disempowered unions, for perhaps somewhat legitimate reasons in the context of picking who the nominee was going to be. The Democratic Party, as early as like the early 70s, started to change their focus of who they were going to look for electoral support from basically the blue collar workers to more professional class and people living in the suburbs, and certainly the DLC was the big attempt to reach out for corporate money. And I remember where I was when Bill Clinton got elected. I was at that time a comedian in Cobb's in San Francisco, looking around, going like, well, I don't understand why people are that excited about this. So to that extent, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. But what I think Bernie Sanders' success has shown, and I think you're mentioning this as well, is that there is a coalition. We're seeing, for a long time, it was like, they would refer to that sort of a professional class as sort of the wine track, right? That was the big complaint about Obama at the time. Like, he only had the wine track. And then at one point in 2008, he garnered the African American and the Latino vote. And that coalition was what carried him over Clinton. Bernie Sanders is showing that, and he's failed to get really the minority vote, the Latino vote in the numbers that he's needed for a myriad of reasons. But he's shown that you don't necessarily need that wine track, that there is now a set of policies that appeal to blue collar and to laborers, and that I think is a movement that has occurred under a president who you and I would at least broadly agree did not hold a bank. Well, I think we would specifically agree did not hold banks accountable at all. In fact, I think a lot of the steam that Bernie Sanders has is a function of Barack Obama not doing anything about it. And I think broadly speaking, Barack Obama has a lot of those neoliberal policies. I mean, right? The Affordable Care Act is let's let the marketplace solve this. Maybe he would have gone further if he had a Democratic Senate and House that was willing to go further. You know, if Joe Lieberman had allowed for a Medicare buy-in, maybe it would have happened. Maybe not. It's hard to know. But it seems to me.
Can I make one quick point about that, Sam?
Yeah.
Can I make one quick point about that? So I have a theory, I 70% believe my own theory here on this one, but I think it's worth saying because you don't hear it anywhere else, that so Barack Obama gets – the big rub on Barack Obama is that he starts his negotiation from the middle of the other side's position, right? Instead of starting out with introducing lefty health care legislation, he proposed Romneycare. So the joke I do is like it's important to vote because last election was Mitt Romney against Barack Obama, and if Mitt Romney would have won, we would have got Romneycare, but Barack Obama won, so we got Romneycare. You see how important it is?
Mm-hmm.
And so my point is we would have got what we have right now anyway if Barack Obama never got elected, because we still had a healthcare crisis in America, and the right wing's answer to that crisis was Romneycare. It was developed by the Heritage Foundation, and so they would have proposed that at some point, and then we would have got that. So even without Barack Obama as president, I think there's a very good chance we would still have the healthcare system we have right now. We don't have a public option attached to
Jimmy,
that. So,
now wait a second. Let me take issue with that.
So let me just make one last. So if he would have proposed Medicare for all, and then they would have proposed Romneycare, and then we could have met in the middle. Maybe we would have had a public option. Maybe we would have had a Medicare buy-in for 50 people. So we would have compromised. Instead of, here's their ideas, let's go ahead and put in their ideas. So that's all I'm saying is there should have been some compromise, but there wasn't.
Well, I mean, look, I think the point of Obama perhaps starting, at on their 45-yard line or our, his own 45-yard line is well taken. But I don't think that there is well, first off, I mean, Romney ran in 2012, right? This is after Obamacare passed. But and Romney ran disavowing his own plan and had to do that to get the nomination, because the bottom line is there's no way in a million years the Republican Party was going to institute that, not in 2000 and 2008. Now, maybe back in 1993 they may have. I mean, they certainly offered it in response to, what was then Hillary Care. And you could argue maybe that, but we're talking about a very different Republican Party now, and I don't think there's any room for any of that. And I don't think that would have happened in a million years. And I have a lot of problems with Obamacare, and I think it remains to be seen what ultimately it's going to be its legacy. We do know that it expanded Medicaid, and would have done so for literally millions more were it not for a Supreme Court. So your theory, let's get back to this theory about what's going to happen. So Trump gets elected, and then all of a sudden the people who voted for him are against him. How does this work? Like, walk me through this as to what's supposed to be the outcome here and how it actually works mechanically. Because I'm definitely open. Look, if somebody could say to me that, I should also say, at one point we got to talk about the Supreme Court because I don't know. Well, let's just talk about your theory first before we get to the Supreme Court. So Trump gets elected, and then you think Democrats, some Republicans, and independents are going to be against him?
Yeah, that's that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, I think purple
states. At what
states,
point does that happen? So they vote for him and then they all turn against him.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about politicians, and I'm talking about the natural coalitions, natural opposition to his kind of policies or to conservatism in general, right? So we could so we have a united front against it instead of having a split front against it,
like we did during Bush.
Like we did. No, the Democrat. What I'm saying is the Democrats. That's the problem. You know, when there's 1 million people in the street going against the Iraq War, protesting the Iraq War, we have Hillary Clinton in the Senate with a lot of Democrats arguing for it. So that's the problem. So I think that's what Bernie Sanders is doing, is showing that you could be. You mentioned it before, Sam. You can be a politician of the people. You don't have to do the wine set. You can actually speak right to the people. They'll support you. You don't need their money. The 1% crowd. He's getting more money right now than Hillary. So he's proving that they're chumps for going out there and taking their money like that and then doing their bidding. He's proving that you don't have to do that, that the people are ready for real democracy, and that if you give them what they want, they'll support you. So I don't know how I got off on that. But
do you think? But let me ask you this: do you think that I mean, I certainly a healthy amount of those Democrats who voted for the Iraq War did so because they were, well, I mean, I don't know if that had to do with fundraising as much as it did with sort of just the political climate at the time. But don't you think that there's also a certain percentage, and I don't, it's tough to put a number on it, but these Democrats actually believe these things? I mean, do you think this is just a function of campaign, or it just happens to be the fact is that these are their preferred policy choices? Because my sense is that at least a third of the Democratic Party, at least if not more, are just they're not coerced into these positions. They have these positions.
Well, there is a conservative wing of the Democratic Party. Right now it's in power, and it's been in power since Bill Clinton. But the actual voting base, they've done research on this, it's way more liberal. In fact, right now the party is way more liberal than it was in 2000. And the moderates and conservatives have fallen down inside the Democratic Party. And right now there's way more liberals than there are moderates or conservatives. In
terms of voters, again, right.
Yeah, as far as voters. So now... So that, to me, that's the problem. Was there really wasn't there's the money party, and like I said before, like I'm a dumb comedian, and I knew the Iraq War was a lie. You can't tell me that a senator with all his information and resources didn't know the Iraq War. We all knew the Iraq War was a lie,
right?
So that's why there was the biggest protest in the history of the world against the Iraq War. We all knew it. And you're telling me people in the Senate didn't know it? That's what's wrong with our country, that those people only represent their donors and they don't represent their voters. And that's what this is about. And you can't keep giving your vote to Hillary Clinton because we're just going to get more of the same. And her policies are almost indistinguishable. I mean, what is she going to do? What is Donald Trump going to do that you're afraid Hillary Clinton won't do?
Well, I mean, the low-hanging fruit in terms of that question is simply on the Supreme Court, right? I mean,
right.
We have Merrick Garland is from a progressive standpoint. I don't think he was he wasn't a terribly progressive pick, but from a perspective of things that I care about, is light years more progressive than Anton Scalia, and light years more progressive than the two people that Donald Trump has floated at this point, and light years more than anybody from the Heritage Foundation who are said to be drawing up the list for Donald Trump would be. And so, and we're talking about so many different issues in terms of the Supreme Court. And I'm not just talking about a woman's right to choose. I mean, Trump had mentioned this yesterday. I'm not just talking about things like the Voting Rights Act. It's without Anton Scalia. If Anton Scalia died 5 years ago, the Voting Rights Act would still be intact. That's massive. When you talk about, the integrity of our voting system, having a functioning Voting Rights Act seems to me to be hugely important. Things like just access to the courts. There was, even tiny things. Like there was a case that was settled out of court by Dow for $835 million after Scalia died. And part of the reason why wasn't directly having to do with Scalia. It was sort of a bank shot. But it had to go into like another case of Tyson Foods that was involving a wage theft dispute. And Tyson was trying to promote this theory that you couldn't use statistical analysis to determine whether or not workers had actually been robbed of their wages, and which of course would be ridiculous. And they wanted to apply that across an entire spectrum of cases that would hold corporations to account. And the absence of a Scalia, and it was 6-2. So, I mean, one could argue that this case didn't hinge on that, although there's an argument as to whether or not Scalia would have turned a couple of people. But nevertheless, you're going to have the next president is going to appoint not just a replacement for Scalia, but probably one or two or maybe even three more Supreme Court justices over the course of 4 or 8 years. So a case like this would have been reversed. Issues that involve Friedrichs. I mean, I know you're a union supporter. If Antonin Scalia did not die when he died, if he died tomorrow, let's say, you could have seen the decimation of public sector unions over the Friedrichs case. I mean, these are huge, huge issues, and there is not a shred of evidence. There is no doubt. There is no way Hillary Clinton's going to get through a democratically controlled Senate, which will happen if she is elected. There is no way someone who is going to vote against labor in that situation is going to get confirmed in the Senate from a Democratic president. And so that in and of itself is so fundamental, and particularly when we're talking about an era with divided government, I don't know that any president's going to be able to do anything other than make those Supreme Court picks. Now, is her appointments to Treasury Secretary, to regulatory bodies, is it going to be good as Bernie Sanders? No way, not even remotely close. But is it going to be better than Donald Trump? Absolutely, 100%. Without a doubt, because, these people on some level, they have their own opinions, but at the end of the day, they are simply relying on power bases that exist electorally, and those electoral power bases impact the other members of their party and so on. That's why Paul Ryan is going to go and capitulate to Donald Trump, because he has to, because the plurality of that party is pro-Trump.